So picture a kid who just turned 18 years old, never been on his own, flying for the first time across the big pond to Germany. And I really enjoyed it. Of course, it caused me to grow up quick. But that's kind of the purpose, right? I mean, you're out there doing things most adults don't do as an 18-year-old. The hero of the story is a PhD professor, mythical, of course, that is very interested, of course, does research in plants and stumbles upon this. I do have some individuals that I look up to in the botany world, friends that I have, and trying to take an average person and become a hero. And if you think about it, you see that all the time in the military. I know there's been some Medal of Honor recipients that have just received that honor in the past couple of weeks. You understand that things happen and how you recover from them matters. And talking about it with other people who maybe need help and aren't willing to go get it. If you can help one person. I always tell folks, when I go into a VFW, I visit quite a few in my travels. I don't look for the folks who are hanging out at the bar having a good time. I look for that guy in the corner who's drinking a beer by himself and doing a couple of shots.
This is Rock Bottom with Ryan. No sugarcoating, no filters. The pain, the chaos, the truth. No bullshit. Just recovery.
If you or someone you love is struggling with mental health, trauma, or addiction, you don't have to figure out the next steps alone. Campbell Recovery Services has a team of professionals ready to help. From crisis support and therapy to life and recovery coaching, and also accountability services, interventions, sober transports, and sober companions. Recovery can feel overwhelming, especially when you don't know where to start. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is make one phone call and ask for help. Campbell Recovery Services is ready to meet you where you are and help you take the next step toward long-term recovery and wellness. So call Campbell Recovery Services at 214-471-5947. That's 214-471-5947. Please give them a call today. They're based out of Dallas, Texas. Anybody out there struggling or knows somebody struggling, don't hesitate. Give them a call. Thank you, Campbell Recovery Services, for sponsoring the show. Thanks to my listeners out there. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy this episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Rock Bottom with Ryan. Here with my guest today, Randal, author of the Threat Unseen book. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. We are not discussing recovery today. We're discussing about his 37 years in the military and how it led to him writing a book, and hear a little bit about his backstory. Randal, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Been looking forward to doing this interview. I love how it's going to be about a action thriller that you wrote, which seems extremely fascinating. I've been doing a little research on it lately, and can't wait to hear what inspired that book. And I know you have a lot to say. Can you just give the audience just a quick overview of where you're from and some of the basics?
Sure. I was born and raised in a town of about 30,000, Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. Although I did not live in town, I grew up in a rural environment in Wisconsin, so you can imagine what that's like. Went all schooling there. I met the young lady who is now my wife in high school. Went on our first date in November of 1985, and we've been together ever since. Can you believe that?
That is great. I love hearing stories like that.
Shortly after high school, I joined the Army, left for basic training in July of 1986, did several years active duty, transitioned into the reserves where I finished my education, did some work. And then when the wars kicked off, I got mobilized and then ended up staying. So finished the last almost 20 years on active duty and transitioned to retirement, June of 2023, bought a camper, sold all my stuff, or my crap, as I like to tell people, because once you get rid of everything, you realize it was just that. You really don't need what you think you need. And we packed ourselves into a camper and hit the road. And we've been doing it ever since.
Oh, that's great. So just life is kind of a constant adventure now, it sounds like.
That's the plan. Yes.
Sounds
the
awesome.
plan is no plan.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I just feel like 37 years of Army influence and everything. I just feel like that's the best lifestyle you could ask for, I think, and spending it with the person that you fell in love with back in high school and stuff. That's
Right.
just an amazing story. So
Yes.
good for you.
And
That's-
she stuck with me
I'm excited
through all
to
that
hear.
too. And so there was a lot of
Yeah,
transition.
that is.
Yeah.
I love hearing about that commitment, from a significant other that they stuck with you through the ups and the downs and everything that you went through and stuff. That's just beautiful to hear. So I'm excited to hear like what you went through and how your guys' relationship changed and everything. So I'm excited to hear the whole story.
Excellent.
So first and foremost, do you mind giving, we talk a lot about recovery on here, and I like to kind of find out a little bit of background, what life was like growing up prior to everything now. So like, what was life like growing up? What was young Randall's life like with family dynamic, any kind of things you went through growing up? Like, can you get kind of a background on that?
I might be biased, but I kind of consider myself having an idyllic upbringing. I had one brother, no sisters, mom and dad, middle-class family, lived in a nice house out in the country in Wisconsin, went through public education. And then for high school, I went to a parochial Lutheran high school. So my background with values and making decisions and understanding people and respect are really all based on my upbringing in Wisconsin. Traveled here and there with my parents, so I got to experience many different things around the country. Never traveled internationally till the Army made me go. But I think my childhood was, I really couldn't ask for anything more with my childhood. I think my parents did everything right. And I think that really led me to where I am today, because you need a good foundation, right, in order to build the rest of the house, not to use a cliche or anything.
Yeah. No, that's good to hear. And so it sounds like they raised you right. You had a good relationship with them. Were there any kind of things that maybe you went through outside of the family or anything that just kind of maybe could have been traumatic or anything like that, or any kind of notable experiences, or
No,
did it not really start till you got to the military?
yeah. When I got to the military, of course, life changes a lot. And I've asked myself these questions also because I'm a very analytical person. I try to think of, where did my story start, and how is your brain wired from experiences you had when you were young? And through all the different therapists that I've had and the treatment and therapy I've gone through, there's really nothing that leads to when I was a child. I think going in the military and leaving home at 17 and the responsibility that's put on you and the rapid growth you have to do in that environment certainly was a punch in the chest.
Okay, so can you take me into, say you're 18, 19, when did you join the military? How old were you?
I was 17. My parents had a sign
17.
for me to go, right? I didn't turn 18 till I was almost done with all my training and heading to Germany.
Wow. So like how did that come about? Was that something that your family suggested or you wanted to do, or did a recruiter come see you? Like, how did all that come about?
So we were a military family in a way. My dad was very active in the Army Reserves. He was drafted for the Korean War, did his time in the Army, and then later on in the 70s joined the reserves. And I was always very interested in it. And I knew if I needed some structure in my life, get my college education paid for, because that was the background that was instilled in me. Make sure you make something of yourself. No one hands you anything. So you have to work for it. So how I worked for it was I joined the Army. My parents, of course, were for it. My mom had some trepidations, of course. I was only 17, but my dad signed, my mom signed, and I left. So I actually sought out the recruiter. I was a dream for those guys. They didn't have to come track me down at high school and knock on my door at home and try to get me to sign something I didn't want to sign. I was ready to go.
Okay, so you were ready. It wasn't one of those things where you were apprehensive to go. Nobody had to twist your arm or anything like that. You were ready. So
Absolutely.
And did you kind of know a lot what to expect based on having a father that was in the military?
Yes. Yep. He gave me lots of good advice. I knew what the structure was like. I knew the commitment I would have. And anybody out there who's listening and in his military, the best advice he gave me before I left was fall into the back of the formation and keep your mouth shut. So that's what I did. And there's no reason to make waves. You're there to learn. So just keep your mouth shut and do what they tell you to do. And that's how my career started.
Good. Yeah. Follow the rules and just, defend our country. So I really thank you for your service, by
Thank
the way.
you.
So
Yeah,
that's
you're
amazing.
absolutely welcome. It's a pleasure.
So can you take me into early days in the, say you'd already met your wife at this point, and take me into like early days of after you joined the military. What was that like? Were there any difficult things, not the obvious, but like, was it hard to adjust to the different, your new norm and all that? And like, what were some of the things you experienced early on?
Really, one of the interesting things is once you get done with your training, what you don't understand that could be difficult to navigate is the lack of structure, if that makes sense. Up until this point in my life, you have your parents to ask for advice. They give you direction. They tell you where to go. They let you know how to do things. In the military, they give you the training and the backbone to succeed. The rest is up to you. So once I graduated basic training in AIT, I got orders to go to Germany. So picture a kid who just turned 18 years old, never been on his own, flying for the first time across the big pond to Germany. And I really enjoyed it. Of course, it caused me to grow up quick, but that's kind of the purpose, right? I mean, you're out there doing things most adults don't do as an 18-year-old. And I think I adapted quite well. I mean, I ended up staying in the military for several decades. My wife was still in high school my first year in Germany, and then she graduated. And then after I did my tour in Germany and transitioned into the reserves, we met up again because we kept in touch the whole time. And then got married in the early 90s. And I went to college, graduated college late 90s. And then, as I mentioned before, once the wars kicked off, they mobilized me as a reservist, that's what they're there for, right? You're in reserve. And it was the surge in Iraq, surge in Afghanistan. The job I was doing, we were very, very busy and got extended again. And eventually what was in Wisconsin for me to go back to was no longer there because my family had already moved down to Fort Knox with me. And I've always loved the military and I had an opportunity to go back active. So I did. So I went back active.
Wow.
I was active starting in 2004 till I retired.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow, that's, I don't think you hear that very often of people, being discharged and then coming back
Right.
willingly. I don't know if
Right.
that's usually the case very often. So, yeah, once again, thanks for your extra service.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's important for people to understand is when you join the National Guard or Reserves, they'll tell you, go do your training and then serve 2 weekends a month. I think if you watch the news now or have been in tunes with military and political headlines since the early 2000s, we have to make sure we expect more from our Guard and Reserve soldiers because they are there in reserve and they do a phenomenal job when called up. And I think that's important to keep into consideration also.
It's good to know, hence the word reserve. I don't think a lot of people think about that,
Right.
They're on call basically. So
Yes,
it sounds
and they
like
drop everything in their civilian world to go.
Exactly. I appreciate the commitment. That's incredible. I was really close back in the day to joining the National Guard. I remember that was the one time I had spoken to recruiters from all different areas of the military, and the National Guard was the one I was closest to joining for some reason. But I think at the time my father talked me out of it and just said, no, I just want to see what you can do, go to school. And
Sure.
Yeah, so he kind of talked me out of it, but
everybody has their own path,
Yeah, exactly. So take me into, I want to hear all about this book, so I kind of want to transition into that soon, but any notable, actually, let's just go into talking about the book. So when did you start feeling like, when did you start being inspired to start writing it? When did the idea come about? Was it while you're in the military? Was it years after retirement? What was it?
I had always thought about it. My degree is in plant biology, and the book is a biological thriller. Things we can do nowadays to manipulate plants. Everybody knows about GMOs. The particular interest I have is in a fungus that grows below the soil, so you don't see it. There's no mushroom above. But plant communities around the world cannot function without the subsoil fungus. So what if you could manipulate those to benefit plants, which is done? What if someone got a hold of that information? Anything you can develop or design for good can be used for bad. And that's the premise of the book. It's kind of a cautionary tale that we have to be careful with what we do out there, right? Things, medicines, technology, bioengineering can all be used to really benefit society, but in the wrong hands, they can also be a detriment too. So I started thinking about the book and some of the ideas while I was in college. It went to the back burner when I was mobilized and then went on active duty. I had several very busy jobs. Once I moved to Fort Carson, Colorado, I was on a rapid, I don't mean having to move out frequently, but we were on a Afghanistan for a year, home for 18 months, Afghanistan for a year type of situation. So spent a good deal amount of time in theater and was very committed to my Army career. And towards the end of it, started kicking the idea around. As I mentioned, the transition, one day you sign out of the Army and you're no longer Major Maurer, you're Mr. Maurer. And you don't realize how that affects you until you are out of ways there. Initially, you're in your honeymoon phase. I did go through some treatment when I was in the Army due to the combat deployments that I had, and had to dive back into that treatment about 6 months in. Never quite sure of the trigger or why things don't go like you want them to. I've gone through some very successful treatment platforms that I advocate for, some that I don't, but I'm not a behavioral health professional, so it's just my opinion. And then I decided I needed a purpose. Everybody needs a purpose in life. And I was running. I like to run a lot. I was running through the deserts by Moab, Utah, and came across a guy who was sitting on a rock drinking some water, an older gentleman. So I stopped to make sure he was okay. And he was retired. And we were talking for a bit. We had a conversation. And I told him, one of the things I need to do is find a purpose. I think if I'm going to continue this nomadic life and not work, which is my goal, I need to find a purpose. And he said, don't worry about finding a purpose will find you. And there was this awkward silence for a bit. And I thought about it and I ran on, he disappeared. And I started thinking about that. And the basis to the story started to come back to me. And the outlet I had to take notes, do research, sit with my laptop in the morning with a cup of coffee and write really became an outlet for me. And I had like a renewed energy again. So I wrote, figured out how to publish it, self-published through a company that'll publish for you, put it on Amazon. And now very excited about putting the structure together for taking the main character. Let's move him to a different part of the world and see what other kind of shenanigans he can get into. So the book's called Threat Unseen. It's available on Amazon in 3 formats. People ask me if it's doing well. My response to that is I sell copies of it. My story is out there and I was happy to tell it. So I'm not out to be the next Stephen King, wouldn't turn it down, but I'm not out to be the next Stephen King and sell millions and millions of books. I just like to write my story, use my knowledge, and we'll see what the next one does.
I love that. I love that. Was there a moment where you thought this story has to be told? What was the exact moment?
I think about things. One of the things I think about, well, it'll never happen to me. It'll never happen to me. And then I start thinking about worst case scenarios out there and how improbable it is that they would happen. Then I start to think about the knowledge I had about how we can manipulate plants and ecosystems really without anybody knowing them. And I started to think to myself, this stuff could happen. There are people out there who are trying to harness technology any way they can for good or bad. And as I started to think about that, I talked to my wife and my family, and I think it was pretty unanimous across the board. It's a story that should be told. So that's when I sat down, and I didn't realize what a joy it was writing until I actually sat down and started doing it.
All right. And then how much of the story is grounded in actual scientific research? Like how much of it is perfectly on point and accurate, or was it, how much of it is, I know a lot of it's obviously fiction, but how much of the scientific stuff is actually
So there's no
factual?
doubt out there we can manipulate plants to do what we want, right? That's what GMOs are. That's how we make crops go better. You can manipulate plants to grow in an organic fashion to where They have the ability to absorb things from the soil and resist pests. So you don't need to use fertilizers and chemicals. There's trees, plants, ecosystems out there that do this automatically, to where if you took what each individual plant can do, put them together and found a way to make a super plant, you could grow organic crops very inexpensively. That's the problem with organics now, right? You go into some of these specialty stores, they're very expensive. They would bring the cost down. People are doing that now. That's a fact. But if I can manipulate a plant to do what you want it to do, what if you could manipulate plants to have massive crop die-up? You wouldn't know why the plants are dying, no matter what kind of forensics you did afterwards. You wouldn't find any chemicals, because it's in the genome. We manipulated these plants. Who could you hold hostage with the ability to do catastrophic crop die-offs, manipulation of food, to where you could influence the global system? So that's where it's based from. So it's based on the fact that we do have this knowledge, but I kind of added additional fiction to the point where we're not there yet. And hopefully we won't.
So what was the biggest challenge in bringing this story to life, if you look back at it? And how long did it take you to write the book?
It came out pretty quick. I don't know, 8 or 9 months. I don't know. Is that quick? I don't really talk to a lot of authors. Maybe I should. I'd be more successful in this business. A couple of things I fought with. One, I can't just put a story out there, because you could really tell this whole story in a couple of pages. You need intrigue, you need suspense. I've traveled a lot around the Caribbean. The particular crop that I use as the basis for this bioengineering is sugarcane. And there's a number of reasons for that. That takes place in the Caribbean. I've traveled all around the Caribbean, all around Puerto Rico. So I was able to visualize it in my head. And of course, having been in the military and knowing how the federal government works and how these federal agencies come in and how they can monitor terrorist organizations and how they can make sure they can track things and keep a handle on folks who are working in certain industries in the world that could potentially be harnessed for good or bad. All of my experience with those things together, and there is a point where we deal with some special forces operations towards the end of the book in the CENTCOM area, which is Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Pakistan. So just to develop a little intrigue in there, yes, it does move to different parts of the world, and trying to solve the problem before it gets out of control is how the book goes. And I just used all my background of many different things to put all this information together, and from all the reviews I've gotten, make a very interesting, fast-moving, intriguing story.
Wow, I love that. I love that. So, I want to know a lot about, obviously, I don't know a ton personally about GMOs and the scientific research behind what you're talking about in the book and stuff, but I do want to hear more about that. But I'm also curious just about how did 37 years in the Army influence the way you write? And did any of the characters in the book, were they based off legitimate people in your life or people that you know? Kind of tell me about that kind of stuff and that kind of influence.
The hero of the story is a PhD professor, mythical, of course, that is very interested, of course, does research in plants and stumbles upon this. I do have some individuals that I look up to in the botany world, friends that I have, and trying to take an average person and become a hero. And if you think about it, you see that all the time in the military. I know there's been some Medal of Honor recipients that have just received that honor in the past couple of weeks. I personally know some people who've done some heroic things who started off like me, 18-year-old kid who just got out of high school and joins the Army. You don't know what's in you and how you'll react in those situations. And I tried to take the main character's angle from that. A guy who just wants to study plants on a beautiful Caribbean island, thrust into this intrigue. He gets picked up by NSA. They need his help to help track down these individuals who might or might not be doing these things. And I take a look at people I know and how I would react in that situation, who are just normal people who end up doing things above and beyond normal.
Wow. Did the story change significantly from the first draft? I mean, you said you were kind of inspired early on, like in high school and stuff, and the ideas started coming about pretty early. But like, how the first draft, how did it evolve as your life experiences changed?
It Because it came around so quick and I'd been thinking about it for so long, it evolved pretty rapidly. And except for editorial changes that my editor recommended, there weren't major body changes of the tale, which is a little worrisome to me because now I've put the pressure on myself to hopefully have the second one come off that easy, right? So I'm being a little more deliberate this time, and if it needs to change, it could. And there's no guarantee in my mind that the second book will roll off that easy. So we'll see how it goes. But to answer your question, no, it's pretty much as I spewed it onto the paper coming out of my thoughts in my head.
Love that. Love that. So, and I'm assuming over the course of the writing of the book, it did characters kind of evolved and changed, just like in any book or
Right.
movie, just kind of character development and everything like that. So,
Yes.
cool.
Yep.
And you say that the main character and the hero is a doctor. And is there like a perspective on leadership that changed since becoming an author and writing about that character? Because leadership's required in the military and stuff. Like, how did you apply that in your writing?
Right. Well, my leadership stance through the military changed because when you are a lower ranking enlisted until you start to make the NCO ranks, sergeant and above, you're an executor. You execute plans that are developed by others. So my first almost 20 years of the military, I took someone else's plan, executed it myself when I was lower ranking, or led my soldiers to execute that plan as I got to be a higher ranking in the sergeant ranks. Once I commissioned, I became an officer. Now you're a planner and you develop the plans and the NCO Corps and soldiers execute. So I was able to see how leadership and how developing plans and how missions get carried out from both ends, being a doer and being an executor. Of course, that's not as linear as it sounds, right? NCO Corps that we have in the United States military is brilliant and develop plans and adjust to things on the fly. And officers carry out missions too, but generally facilitator, executor of plans. So I was able to take looking at it from both sides and incorporate it into the book and see how the folks trying to solve the problem develop the plans to corner these individuals and track them down, and those on the ground that are actually doing the work to do it. So I was able to take the experience I had from my time in the military and the diverse background I had and mold these characters into how I thought they should be in a realistic situation, even though it's completely fiction.
Yeah. Okay. And how much is I know you say it's completely fiction, but how much like research did you do on your own or work with other people in order to kind of make a lot of the writing semi-accurate and believable, and so people could, look at it realistically to believe in the story?
I would bounce some ideas, some of them off of PhD trained scientists. The leadership I bounced off of individuals I know who have been in that situation. I have some family who are in the public service as far as police, firemen, things like that. And I'd always kind of just pick and choose certain ideas I wanted to bounce off of an individual. And you can tell by their comments backward if that's something that is realistic. And then the rest of it was just piecing it together in my mind. I have a notebook that probably the average human couldn't read. It's got notes all over it and they're out over in the page. But in my mind, it makes sense. And I was able to put it together and write a book that keeps you turning the pages.
Yeah, I've heard that's the case with a lot of authors, even anybody that writes, even musicians and stuff they'll write down just notes in random places. And it may look like you're trying to solve algebra, to the
Right.
average person or learn a foreign language,
Right.
but to that person who wrote it just makes perfect sense.
Right. It's a delicate balance.
I love that though.
It's a delicate balance by keeping the story on point, moving forward, and making sure you don't have, to use a military phrase, diarrhea of the mouth, right? You can just keep spewing stuff out. But if none of it make any sense and it doesn't follow a logical order, then people lose interest quick. And I really looked at it from that angle. Am I describing this too long? Would the average person really be interested this long in what I'm trying to say, or do I need to shift and bounce? But if you bounce too much, am I going to lose people who are reading also because they can't follow the story? So it was difficult, but it's a challenge I enjoy.
Good. Do you think any of the threats in your novel could become reality?
There's always more stuff going on out there than you think, right? With the proper science and technology, I think it could. I also know that for every smart person you have, and you can see this in the military industrial complex, in the technology field, anybody who's developing something to take you one direction, there's always someone just as smart who can stop you and send it the other direction. I did struggle with that a little bit. Do I want to put something like this out there, an idea, if you will, of something that could be done that could affect a lot of people? But I do it with confidence because I know that for all the smart people who are working against us, there's so many people in so many organizations that have knowledge well above mine who are probably already thinking steps way ahead of me. So I didn't think too much about, is this something I should be writing about? Because I think we should get everything out there. I think we should discuss things. We should have open forums where, are we worried about what any technology is going to take us? Look at the discussions people have now on AI. I don't know anything about AI, nor do I really care to. And I can barely spell it, as I like to tell folks, let alone understand it. So, but certainly something like this should be discussed, and people should be aware of the possibilities that are out there, and with any technology, on which direction it can go.
Yeah, no, AI, I mean, as much as I will utilize it to help me in business and work, and sometimes even, doing some things for the podcast editing and stuff, I use it, but it does frighten me more and more every day how many things you can do with AI now.
Absolutely.
And it's taken away from us learning and developing on our own and stuff. So I kind of almost worry about the younger generations after ours, that are, you could type in, sadly, just speaking to an author right now, I think you can type in a description of a book and it could write a book for you, which is really sad. And it just takes away all your creative thinking.
Yeah.
So
there's a company out there, I hear ads for them. You can do it as a gift. You can speak into their AI program about a relative or friend, and within 10 minutes of you telling the basic life story of this person, it develops a comic with the drawings about their life. So you can give someone a comic book of their life. And to go what you're saying, what's it going to take to be an author somewhere down the road? Can I just, out of my mind, put an idea and it writes something? I certainly hope not, because it takes away the creativity from people. And we need creative people out there in the science field, in the military, in corporate life. You need creative people, because it's those ideas really that generate what you should be putting into something like AI, or something that helps manipulate your thoughts to make them better, not generate them.
I like that answer. I really like that answer. A couple random questions that I just kind of want to know personally, but like, if, say, Threat Unseen, say you were approached and it was going to become a movie, who would you cast as the lead?
Well, I think most people would say me, right? Because you have this crazy idea in your head when you develop something, that who would be best at it? Well, of course I would. It was my idea. I don't know. I have thought about that question. I know when they make something in a movie, they want to make a lot of changes. I've often thought to myself, how would I handle that? But to have someone as a lead, it would have to be someone who could pull off being intellectual, ambitious, very active. So that would be pretty difficult. I don't know a lot about pop culture today, so I don't really know who's out there. But, if I look at myself in the mirror, and do I think Brad Pitt could play me? Of course, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it? And plus, that's an ego boost for myself.
That's funny. That's interesting because that's the first actor that came to my mind when I was thinking about actors, and I was like,
Yeah.
Brad Pitt would just be the go-to.
Hey,
Yeah,
if
and
you know him, give
he's
him a call. Feel free to pass on my number.
oh for sure. If I get him on the show, I'll say, hey, I know an author, and he's coming out with a movie.
There we go. I like it.
So, were there any books that influenced you the most as a writer, like something you read in high school or the past that just kind of said, hey, this is why I want to write this, this is the kind of the route I want to go? Not that you did anything from another book, but I'm just saying, like, is there like a book that stood out to you?
I of course read a fair amount. I try to take time out of each day to read. I can't pinpoint any specific book, but I can say I've gotten so many ideas from many different books that tell me which direction to go when I'm writing. But to pinpoint it to one particular book, I wouldn't think so. I like action, even in my personal life. Like I said, I'm doing a running race tomorrow that goes up some mountains in the Rocky Mountains. I like to climb. I like to hike. So adventure, being mentally stimulated, having some action are all things that I like. So those kind of books I gravitate towards. So the ideas when it comes to developing something to write, I guess I pull from all.
Cool. Yeah. I feel like everything we experience in daily life kind of inspires everything we do anyways. People we associate with, things we do just on a daily basis. It shapes us into who we actually are. Even I've heard before, not that this completely relates, but I've heard somebody say that we're like the culmination of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And I feel like, you could apply that to writing. We could be a culmination of all the books we reread in the past and how that could have inspired our writing. So.
Yep, absolutely. You may not even know what they are, but somewhere in your head,
Exactly.
you categorize things, right? I like to look at the brain as like a file cabinet. Everything's in its own file, and you pull certain files. The ones closer to the front you use more. And so, yeah, who knows what's in there, right?
Exactly. So I kind of on topic but off topic. What being in the military for that long, and you said something before we started recording about there being like a honeymoon period and all that. So was there a lot of PTSD that came about, or was there or there's a honeymoon period referring to just a comfort zone after retirement and feeling like, you want a purpose,
Right.
but like, what was that honeymoon
Right.
period and like what came about? Like, was it PTSD or other things, or what was it?
Yeah, so I had some issues post deployments that being thick-headed, it's a very macho environment when you're in combat arms in the military. That took me a while to seek treatment for. And the fact that I'm even talking about it now makes me feel better about how much strides and how far I've come. I deployed to a pretty kinetic area, and I'll be the first to tell people I did not have it as bad as a lot of people did in Afghanistan. Yes, I was in northern Nuristan. It was what we called the sexy part of Afghanistan to go to in the early 2000s. The hunt for Osama bin Laden was there. We took small arms fire, RPGs. We got rocketed quite frequently. But I know people who are in much worse situations than me, where if they didn't take small arms fire first thing in the morning, they'd worry because they thought the enemy was planning something bigger, right? So I did not have it as bad as many other folks, which is probably what drove me to think I really didn't need to go see somebody or to get help. So I did over a course of time from about 2013. I went through some treatment programs for some traumatic things I had witnessed, some traumatic things I had went through. I did something called prolonged exposure, where you revisit in your mind those traumatic events till you can revisit them and they're not traumatic anymore. And I'll tell you, that's a living hell. It works for a short period of time, but that's not
like exposure therapy.
Yes, not a way I felt that works for me. And it didn't work. I continued to see people. The biggest incident that affected me a lot was I left theater early. My second time, and the team I worked with went through a very strong event where several got killed and wounded. And I didn't realize what grief does and how grief can be so numbing to you, even for a situation you weren't involved when you were there. But I took it personal because I wasn't there. So I continued to get more treatment and started to talk to people about treatment. But when I first started seeing someone, a behavioral health specialist in the Army, I had him walk me out the back door of the clinic that I was going to because I was so embarrassed that if I walked back through the lobby, I would run into somebody I know. So, that's where I started, to the point where I'm talking to you about behavioral health situations that I've had. So at that 6-month mark, getting back to what you asked about, I don't know what it was. We were driving through Louisiana. If you've ever been on Interstate 10 in Louisiana, there's very tall bridges to allow the shipping lanes to go on. I saw one in the distance. I'm pulling my camper, mind you, said, nope, not doing it. Did a U-turn on the highway in my camper. And that's when I realized something's wrong. Because that first 6 months, you're released, you're free, right? It's like letting a pigeon out of a cage. You just fly. No one's checking on me. I was crossing international borders. The Army didn't care. It was something very new to me. So I don't know what happened. So I called the VA, went back into treatment. I did something called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Getting back to my file cabinet knowledge. My concern was when you're suffering from grief and suffering from traumatic things that you've seen in combat. I think sometimes people like to suffer because you feel you should, because they did, the other folks involved in the incident, and you don't want to forget them. But there's a difference between forgetting somebody and moving on. I think it's two big different things. And I've been able to deal with the situations I was in and that I've experienced, even ones I wasn't at, but affected me because people I knew got killed and injured. EMDR allows you to take those files that you're revisiting probably too much, move them to the back of the file cabinet so you're not forgetting anybody. You don't need to feel guilty about anything. You're reprocessing how you talk and how you think about these people. So now one of my missions when I talk to my veteran friends who are also getting close to retirement, I ask everybody to seek help. Make sure they go get help, see somebody, and you don't have to be ashamed. One of the best things my therapist told me is it's okay to be afraid. And just because you're afraid doesn't mean you can't have fun. So I've dealt with a lot of those types of things that are going on in my head and have allowed me to, I think, get on with life quite well. I enjoy things a lot more, experience true joy in the things that I do, where a lot of times when you suffer from those situations, you just smile and everybody thinks you're happy, but are you really feeling joy in your heart? And after the long road I've had, I can truly say that now. You understand that things happen and how you recover from them matters. And talking about it with other people who maybe need help and aren't willing to go get it. If you can help one person. I always tell folks, when I go into a VFW, I visit quite a few in my travels. I don't look for the folks who are hanging out at the bar having a good time. I look for that guy in the corner who's drinking a beer by himself and doing a couple of shots. Who's helping that guy? Who's making sure someone's talking to him, right? Who's seeing that he's getting help? So besides writing and enjoying my adventurous life, traveling around, one of my other missions is to speak on behalf of veterans and veterans advocacy and making sure we're doing the right things, taking care of veterans like myself and those in the future.
Good. I love that. I think it's really, I've heard a lot from other veterans that have been on the show and just in general throughout my life, just about veterans not getting the proper treatment. It goes beyond saying thank you for your service. I mean, there's a lot of aftercare that I think a lot of them don't get in retirement. Rather, even if it's not direct PTSD from being in battle and witnessing things, I mean, still, it's just the service, the discipline, all the stuff that are required for years and years of service. It's, I think, yeah.
And I think it's everybody's duty who served or not, make sure veterans are taken care of. Look at the Army advertising campaign, Be All You Can Be. So you join up, you're all you can be, but then when you get out and you're not, we need to make sure those people are taken care of. We brought them in being all they can be. When you're no longer that person when you get out, it's our duty as a society to make sure that they can be all they can be in retirement. Let's not release broken.
Exactly. So are you already working on a sequel or another novel? Like, what's your plan there?
I am. And we had the opportunity to travel around Spain and Germany late winter. And discovered some mysteries at some places we visited, and I'll just kind of touch it vaguely because it's still going together. But events that occurred in history that appear to be unanswered. Well, what if this person, I told you this, the hero in this book is a college professor at University in Illinois. What if he takes sabbatical and heads overseas and takes his year off to do research in Germany and stumbles upon some of these things? And then the story ensues from there. So I'll leave it at that. It's been a joy researching it. It's a part of history I didn't really know or understand till I was briefly touring some of these castles and things, briefly introduced to the mystery of these places and hidden room and religious and archaeological relics that have gone missing or have they, type of. So I'm kind of developing something that way, still bringing in the botanical world and the science of it, but stumbling across some things that raise curiosity in this person, and he goes out to investigate them. So once again, if you need someone to star in it, let Brad know I'm developing this, and we'll see if we get them.
I will. Well, I can't remember if I remember right, but I think Brad Pitt was in recovery for a while or something. So that's somebody that, who knows, I aspire to have on this podcast someday to talk about.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Maybe I will. If I do, I'll send him your way. So a couple closings, but like two-part question, which are kind of related, but is there a message you'd like every reader to walk away with? And where do you see your writing career in 5 years?
The message to walk away with is always keep your eyes open, whether that's to what someone is telling you that technology and quote unquote advancements in society are leading up. I'll always look at the other side, right? There's two sides to every story. There's two directions research can go. There's two directions technology can go. Be open about it. Listen to other people's opinions about it. Educate yourself in things that trouble you and things you see on the news and interests that you have. And I like to think, some people I've talked to who've read the book said it really did open their eyes to that like, holy cow, I didn't know this could come as a result from a different result we were trying to get. So always keep that in mind. Where I'd like to see myself in 5 years, of course, I'd always say I'd love to sell a ton of books. And that's indeed true. That's the end result of the fascination I have with putting a book together and the research about topics that I'm interested in and putting together. So I'd like to still be writing in 5 years, still get the joy from it that I get now. And if I can sell a few books, shameless plug, like this one, which you can get on Amazon. How is that? For a plug I threw in there. If I could do that, then I'd be very satisfied.
Yeah. No, that's great. I actually am really intrigued, and I'm going to have to check it out myself because it would be different than any book I've ever read. I usually would go to, just you mentioned like Stephen King or James Patterson, things like that. Those are kind of the books I would go with, or autobiographies and stuff. So this would be different. So I'm going to have to check it out. So being on the show called Rock Bottom with Ryan, I always like to ask some question related to this, but what has been your personal rock bottom or biggest challenge in life, and what did it teach you?
To listen to others, right? One of the first things when I decided that maybe I should see somebody or get some help, my wife and I were walking the dog one day after my first deployment. Of course, I'm very comfortable speaking, excuse me, to my wife because I've known her since the middle 80s. Plus, she's a social worker. That's key also. So she's a great listener. I just started telling her about some stories. I talked about some individuals that we had killed because, of course, they engaged us and we did what we were supposed to do as soldiers. And the feeling of relief we had as soldiers in that situation and how happy we were about it because it's an us or them scenario in combat, right? And my wife said, those are people too. And there was an awkward silence and I never thought about it. And yes, they're the enemy. They're there doing to you what you're trying to do to them. And I didn't know it at the time, but that really affected me. I kind of closed down about talking about things. I found myself in the worst situation. My comfort was swinging by, picking up a 6-pack of beer, going home and not talking. That was like 2013-ish, late 2010. I didn't know it at the time, but I think mentally that was probably my lowest point. And I started to realize that that's not sustainable. Uh, you can't go on for decades and decades like that. So on her advice, I went to see somebody, and that's where it all started. And I think it's been slow, but up from there. And, it just makes you realize so much more about life. And there's more to life than just dwelling on the past. You should learn from the past, and the past is important. But if you're sitting at home like I was, off in a corner, that's not where you want to be. You as an individual have so much more to give, even if you don't realize it at that time, what your purpose is and how you can help others down the road, or even if you're not out to help others, just to help yourself live a joyful life, enjoy things in life. I'd say that was probably the lowest point. And it's kind of a bummer to say, because I've kind of led you to believe like it was her fault by saying that, but it's not at all. Being a very understanding person herself, perhaps she saw something in me I didn't. So I trusted her. And that's the other thing too, is sometimes you can't tell if something's wrong with you. And I told her that before I went on deployments. If I come home and I'm different, you gotta let me know, because I won't. And looking back on it, that was probably her way of telling me something's different. So listen to others, do what you need to do to treat yourself, and to really make sure that you're the best person you.
I love that. Couldn't have said it better. You may have already answered this question, but my final question, which kind of relates to what you were just talking about, but I want to see if you have more to elaborate on. But if somebody, for my listeners out there, if somebody listening feels stuck or afraid to pursue their dreams, because I loved what you said earlier, that it's about the purpose will find you. I just love that quote. If you're worried about what your purpose is, the purpose will find you. If somebody's listening out there feels stuck or afraid to pursue a dream, what would you tell them?
Put your ego aside. Because what stops us from doing things? What others are going to think about them? Our ego of how we want others to perceive us. If you're going to be creative and you're going to put something out there like a book, a story, if you're going to do a podcast like you're doing about some of the topics you talk about, recovery and how people have been successful since they were at their low point, you got to put your ego aside. Go with your gut, go with your heart. Do what you want to do as long as it doesn't offend or hurt others, and put it out there, and also be open to reaction. That's how you learn. I'd have been naive to think I could write a book, put it out there, and it's going to get 5 stars from everybody, and they're going to say you're the greatest. They make a movie, Brad Pitt stars in it, not to revisit that again. But you got to be courageous. You got to take your idea, be courageous. Think about how you're going to affect other people, whether it's negative or positive. Take that into consideration, and just be brave and go out there and do it. Tell your story.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Well, I'm so grateful for you coming on today and talking about the book, and I'm excited to be checking it out. Do you have it on audiobooks? Where can people get the book, read the book? How can people find you if they have any questions about it? Can you shout out all your contact?
Sure. I'm on Threat Unseen. You can contact me through the book's Instagram page. You can find me on Instagram also. I go by Running Randal, Randal with 1 L, RUNNING, RANDAL. All my contact information's there in my link tree. I'm on LinkedIn. And of course, you can buy it hardcover like this on Amazon. It's also sold on paperback. And yes, you most definitely can get the e right off of Amazon. Put Threat Unseen in the search. I always ask folks to reach out to me and be honest with me and let me know what you've thought about it. And I respond to everybody, and I consider it a learning process. I can do better next time, and hopefully intrigue more people as I continue to publish.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'll pop all that stuff on the screen for my listeners
Wonderful.
out there.
Thanks.
If you're watching the show or listening, I will make sure that's on the screen. So
Perfect. Thanks so much.
thank you so much, Randal. You were amazing to talk to, and it's great to just hear a lot of other aspects of your personal story, not just the story that you wrote, but just to hear about how amazing of a relationship you have with your wife is such a refreshing thing to hear, and to hear how you've been able to process things and incorporate writing into your daily routine in order to find purpose in retirement, and love the fact that you guys are on a constant adventure across the country, and that you're into running too, which I'm a big runner, so I appreciate that anytime I hear it. So I just love what you're doing, in writing and outside of that. So very good inspiration to a lot of my listeners out there, even ones that weren't or associated with the military and stuff, I feel like your story is inspiring to anybody who wants to pursue any dream. So, 'cause we do all have a purpose, and sometimes a purpose will find us, like you said. So,
Yeah.
Final question. Is there a quote you would like to leave with the listeners to end?
The two I always have, get uncomfortable or get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I went up a mountain the other day and it was like 30 degrees and 70-mile-per-hour gusts, and I was standing up there. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and do hard things. That's how you grow. That's how you get better. Do hard things. They'll reward you.
So true. That's so true. We don't try, it's obviously not going to get us anywhere because if we're worried about failure. So obviously just do it. So yeah, get comfortable being uncomfortable. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Randal. I really appreciate you being on.
I appreciate taking your time and willing to link in with me and having this great discussion. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Rock Bottom with Ryan. No bullshit, just recovery.